Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Newport News School Board for Tuesday, March the 23rd, 2021. On behalf of the school board and the superintendent, I welcome each of you present and watching. A quorum is present to transact the business of the school division. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an unprecedented effect on all of us. We are all adapting to this new way of conducting business, and the school board is as well. Personal barriers are installed between the members of the board and our staff. Visitors are masked and socially distanced in the auditorium in compliance with the governor's orders. During this evening's meeting, some of our participants will join us in person and others will join us virtually, including Mr. Marvin Harris and Mr. John Ely. We are taking these steps to ensure the health and well-being of our staff and the public. We value and appreciate your partnership. We will begin tonight's meeting with the invocation and pledge to the flag. Here to do the honors is Ms. Rochelle Moody, PTA President at Woodside High School. Ms. Moody.
Good evening, Dr. Parker, Chairman Brown, Vice Chair Searles Law, members of the school board, and the extended NNPS family. As we continue to get through this very difficult school year, I would like to leave these thoughts with you. Struggle today for a better tomorrow. Hard work pays, you should always know. No matter how tough may seem the climb, keep moving, keep fighting, one win at a time. Perseverance and patience go a long way, because for the sunrise, even the longest nights make way. Please join us as we do say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Moody. The next item on our agenda tonight is school board recognitions, and Dr. Parker, I believe we have some distinguished guests with us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have recognitions this evening for our 2019-2020 WISE Gold Star teachers. We'll start there, and we have one additional recognition, and I'll let Mrs. Price recognize our individuals.
Good evening. I have the honor of presenting this month's school board recognitions. Ensuring that young people are financially literate is paramount to prepare them for future financial success. Our first recognition this evening illustrates the district's success in this area. Working in Support of Education, or WISE, is an educational organization dedicated to building financial literacy, fostering business and social entrepreneurship, and preparing students for college and the global workplace. The organization's literacy certification program provides high school students with financial education and the opportunity to become certified financially literate. Students learn more about personal finance, then they take the WISE Standardized Financial Literacy Certification Test. Our first honorees this evening have earned recognition from WISE. 2 Newport News educators have been named 2019-2020 Gold Star teachers. At least 93% of their students in at least one of their classes passed the WISE Financial Literacy Test, which is also a Virginia Board of Education approved certification. They're present this evening. Please join us in congratulating Tiffany Smith, an educator at Heritage High School. Ms. Smith. And Michael Bellamy, formerly of Warwick, now serving as interim assistant principal at Crittenden Middle School. The Virginia Standards of Learning for Economics and Personal Finance require instruction in economic concepts, economic reasoning, decision-making, and problem-solving. High school students have to meet a state requirement to complete a one-credit economics and personal finance course prior to graduation. These educators taught the personal finance course during the summer of 2020. With the help of these dedicated educators, their students not only satisfied a graduation requirement, they also earned state and national certification. Thank you for equipping our students with the tools and life skills they need to become college, career, and citizen ready. Thank you, and again, congratulations to Ms. Smith and Mr. Bellamy. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the Career and Technical Education Specialist, Christy Hopkins. Ms. Hopkins, thank you for joining us this evening. Our next honoree also received national recognition. The National Art Association advances visual arts education to fulfill potential and promote global understanding. Each year, the association recognizes one outstanding member from each of the 4 national regions for outstanding service and achievement. We're proud to share that our visual and performing arts supervisor, Pat Franklin, has earned recognition. Ms. Franklin has been awarded the 2021 Southeastern Region Art Educator Award. Ms. Franklin, would you please come forward? The visual arts program in Newport News Public Schools begins in elementary school. Our art curriculum offers a comprehensive, sequential educational program that is designed to develop and nurture creative thinking skills through high school. Under Ms. Franklin's leadership, a district-wide arts festival was established and the popular Summer Institute for the Arts expanded. She has raised the quality of art education through curriculum changes and support for her teachers. She works cooperatively with her counterparts in the region and across the state to advance quality art education through curriculum planning, staff development, and idea and strategy sharing. During her decorated career, Ms. Franklin has served the field of art education locally, statewide, nationally, and internationally. She serves on numerous committees, and earlier today she told me she scaled these back. The Board of Newport News Public Art Foundation, the Board of Virginians for the Arts, Americans for the Arts, the Board of Virginia Coalition for Fine Arts Education, the Virginia Museum Teacher Advisory Committee, the Virginia Symphony Community Outreach Committee, the National Art Education Fellows, and the Virginia Department of Education Fine Arts Steering Committee. She's also a member of the Virginia Art Education Association, the National Art Education Association, the National Association for Music Education, and the Educational Theater Association. And she's also held several leadership roles in many of these associations during her career. Her knowledgeable, inclusive leadership and vision have been a great benefit to our students since she joined the school division in 2002. Ms. Franklin, again, congratulations on this well-deserved honor. Again, we congratulate all of our honorees this evening. The school board will take about a 7-minute break so that our honorees may leave if they choose to do so. You're certainly welcome to stay. During this time, our viewing audience will have the opportunity to view this month's school board spotlight. So we'll stand in recess for about 7 minutes. Thank you.
Since almost a year ago, students haven't set foot in a Newport News classroom because of the ongoing global pandemic and statewide restrictions. But on Monday, February 22nd, 3,000 students in pre-kindergarten to third grade, along with special education students and English language learners, took a huge step, celebrating their first day of school by returning to in-person hybrid learning. At each school, educators went to great measures to enhance safety protocols, social distancing, and cleaning procedures to create a safe environment for students and staff. Even with masked faces, students and teachers were obviously excited to be in the same classroom together after so many months interacting through a computer screen. And since many students are still learning virtually, our hardworking teachers are dedicated to teaching and supporting all of their students, no matter where learning takes place.
Virtual learning is a new experience for all of us. And for our young scholars, what they're learning during online classes is just as important as taking care of themselves between each Zoom link. When teachers finish their face-to-face instruction and before the next online class begins, students have several choices to optimize their learning experience. If there's classwork to complete, get it done while the content is still fresh in your mind. And since most work doesn't have any time constraints, take your time completing the assignment accurately. But taking a break from the screen is important also. Short breaks can actually improve productivity, attentiveness, and reduce stress. Instead of watching TV or zoning out on a smartphone, take a walk around the house, get outside and run around, exercise, complete a helpful chore around the house, or grab a quick, nutritious snack to keep your body and brain fueled for learning. When we move our bodies, problem solving, memory, and attention span improve. So try starting the morning with some fun exercises, ensuring a full day of academic success.
In recognition of Youth Art Month, 2 virtual art exhibits showcase student artwork in elementary and secondary schools. Online and across social media, these virtual presentations replace the annual Newport News Public Schools art show that normally takes place in person. But even online, the students' talents, skills, and unparalleled imagination shone brightly. And beyond the student artists, it was evident that our highly skilled and devoted art teachers haven't let a pandemic quench their creative influence. Through the difficulties and challenges of distance learning, art teachers at all grade levels have effectively drawn every ounce of talent out of these budding artists for all to see and enjoy. Meanwhile, student musicians are able to shine during Music in Our Schools Month. A number of schools recorded individual and collaborative performances of their talented musicians, including bands, choruses, guitar ensembles, and orchestras. All of the performances were then collected into one impressive virtual concert video. Posted on YouTube and shared across social media, this musical compilation brilliantly showcases student talents across the city, as well as the dedication of the musical educators who spur them on to greatness, no matter what form of learning takes place. During the week of March 8th, all grades in Newport News Public Schools returned to their school buildings for in-person hybrid learning. And students and educators couldn't mask their smiles and excitement to once again be together for learning. Early in the week, 4th and 5th grade students completed the elementary school transition to hybrid learning, while middle and high schools welcomed students on Monday and Thursday, with different groups of scholars swapping days between in-person and remote learning at home. To make in-person learning a safe reality for students and staff, all NNPS employees played a vital role in ensuring safe transportation, clean classrooms, and healthy food options, along with effectively implementing new safety guidelines. Even though it may feel like a new start to the school year, this return to in-person instruction is a necessary continuation of the great teaching and hard work our dedicated teachers have provided students over the last few months. With learning now taking place at schools and many students continuing to succeed through virtual learning, students across Newport News have more options to fit their family schedules and personal styles of learning.
All right, well, welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the school board spotlight. And during our regular meetings, we provide time for the public to address the school board. These opportunities are scheduled in the early part of our agenda and also towards the end of the meeting. The school board recognizes that during the pandemic, some members of the public may not be able to join us in person. As advertised, citizens may submit comments via web form, email, or voicemail up to 30 minutes prior to our meeting time to be included in the official meeting record. For those of you joining us in person, the board considers this an opportunity to listen to your comments. Please understand that we will consider your concerns and get back to you at a later time. We ask that you comply with our 3-minute time limit. As you begin your comments, a green light will come on, which is over there. Yellow light signals that you have 30 seconds left, and it's time for you to wrap up your comments, and a red light indicates that your time is up. So as I call your name, please come forward. So as mentioned previously, we do have a 30-minute time limit for this session. And I'd have more than 10 cards. So you do the math, 10 times 3, more than 10 cards, which means that some of you may not be able to speak in this portion of the meeting, but we have another 30-minute portion in item number 6 of the meeting, which is after our reports. So if you don't get a chance to speak, if I don't call your name in this section, then please stick around, and we want to hear from you in item number 6 of our agenda. All right, so the first card that I have is Ms. Diane Griffiths.
Should I keep the mask on or take it off?
You can take your mask off while you're
Okay.
speaking.
Hi, I'm Diane Griffiths. My son is a junior in the IB program at Warwick High School. He has started in person recently. 2 days a week. He goes on Mondays and Tuesdays. He is the only student in one of his classes and one of only 2 or 3 students in all the other classes. The numbers are the same in the Thursday-Friday cohort, so the total would not even fill the allowable seats in the classrooms. There's no logical reason why he should not be able to attend school on Thursday and Friday. He would not be taking the seat of any other student. And apparently the rules for who can attend in person right now are governed at the district level. And schools are unable to make these decisions for themselves. The result is empty seats and empty classrooms where there are students who want and need to sit in those seats. My son needs to be in the classroom. Although he spends the majority of the day in Zoom sessions at school, which is another issue, just the increased structure and a tiny bit of interaction he gets with his 1 or 2 classmates, with his teachers, with the school security officer, it makes an incredible difference in the quality of his life. There's no accountability when he's at home. Assignments pile up, online games get played, unless I'm looking over his shoulder at all times, which is really hard to do, and keep my job. So now, at least for 2 days, he's there getting his work done and connecting with human beings. I'm begging you to please allow the schools to make decisions that meet the individual needs of students and cohorts of students and fill the seats that can safely be filled. On a final note, I want to thank Newport News Public Schools for your efforts in supporting the vaccination clinics at CNU. Thank you, Dr. Parker, for publicizing your own vaccination. I urge you all to do more of this, to even more strongly publicize the vaccination of staff and teachers, and to actually take a hands-on role in educating families in the district. There are a ton of vaccine-hesitant families out there who, if they saw and heard more from people they can trust concerning the safety of the vaccine, then ultimately this could make a difference. Getting more families vaccinated, the COVID numbers will come down. We can solve all of this and get our kids back in the schools where that's where they need to be. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Griffiths. All right. The next card I have is Mr. Calvin Griffiths.
Hello, I am Calvin Griffiths. I am currently an 11th grader at Warwick High School in the IB program. And I'm currently in cohort A, so I attend school on Monday and Tuesday. And as my mom said earlier, I'm the only student in one of my classes, and there's only about 2 or 3 maybe in my biggest class. There's 3 people including me. So cohort B has like the same amount of people. There's about 2 or 3 people in every single class. And I would not be taking anybody's seat if I were to go on Thursday and Friday. Same for them, the cohort B, if they attended Monday and Tuesday, they wouldn't be taking my seat or any of my other classmates. So in-person allows me to complete my work after the Zoom ends, because I know as the online students, as soon as you click off the Zoom, they'll take a nap, they'll do whatever. That's what I did. And in-person allows me to actually complete my work with my teacher's help. And on top of that, I actually get some human interaction, which I do not get sitting in my bedroom at home. Overall, I think it would be a very safe and in my fellow in-person classmates' favor to be able to attend in-person learning 4 days a week.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths. Thank you. Next card I have is Mr. Gene Magruder.
Hello, school board. I would like to say hi to Marvin Harris and John Ely. They're online. A lot of y'all know me, but for some of y'all that don't, glad to meet you for the first time, Mr. Parker. My name's Gene Magruder. I'm Political Action Chair for Local 8888, United Steelworkers at Newport News Shipbuilding. We represent the 13,000 production employees at Newport News Shipbuilding, and we're the largest local in the United States. On that Saturday, our membership voted to support the local teachers of Newport News in their campaign to get the right to collective bargain, according to the legislation passed last year. I'm here to tell you the benefits. A lot of y'all don't know maybe about collective bargaining, but I'm here to tell you the benefits of collective bargaining with your teachers. The shipyard, including our president, Jennifer Boykins, and Mike Petters, both know the value of having a union in the workplace. There are 2 main reasons. The first reason being stability in the workforce. When our contract is signed at the shipyard, they know the employees have agreed to the terms of the contract, and they know they're willing to work under those terms. So there's not much leaving the shipyard and coming back, because we know the terms. We know what we've agreed. We've signed on to those wages and benefits. The second reason is that it allows the shipyard to make normal variable costs, which concerns the school board. Y'all have a lot of variable costs, such as wages and benefits, and turn them into fixed costs. When we negotiate a contract for carriers and submarines, we actually can go to the Navy and we can tell them on that contract exactly how much wages and labor are going to cost over them 4 years, the terms of our contract. You're turning a variable cost for most businesses, including the school board, because every year y'all got to figure out what the teachers will like and what the teachers won't like, or what you can afford or what you can't afford. But we can concentrate on shipyard on such things as cost of materials, new technology to go into these boats. But we don't have to worry about wages and benefits because they're in writing. Currently in Virginia and Newport News, the school board is handicapped by the current system of yearly fights over wages and benefits. I've been a part of it. It just goes every year, back, every year. It's never-ending process, causes too much hate and discontent between the 2 groups that are most important to our children's education, that being the teachers and the school board. The current system is shown to be very bad for stability in the teachers' workforce because no one knows what the beginning or end results will be. The school board has zero clue what wage rate or level of benefits is necessary to retain teachers. They will know once they finish the budget and they get a rate and see how many leave or stay. With the collective bargaining agreement, both bodies will know exactly what will keep them teaching.
All right, thank you, Mr.
The teachers would have agreed. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope I see y'all out on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Magruder.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, the next card I have is Mr. Mike Macaluso.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm here really in support of Mrs. Griffith's initiative. My son is a middle schooler, a sixth grader at Booker T. Washington, and the exact same issue there. There's only a couple people involved classes. The virtual thing wasn't working for him. He spends all day on Xbox. He doesn't study. He's got younger sisters, so he's shut in his room, and the walls kind of cave in on him. Somehow he makes straight A's, despite all of that, but his benchmark scores have been flat. And I think he could really benefit. Actually, the 2 days, even with only one other person in his class, has actually been helpful for him, and I think he would benefit from going all 4 days. And secondly, I wanted to just advise that it would be helpful if we had the plan for next year going forward as early as possible so we can all figure out what we're going to do from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Macaluso. All right, next card I have is Mr. Eric Silverman.
Well, thank you all. This has been a very difficult year for all of us, and you've provided a fine education from the first day, the first Monday. I was so surprised that you provided packets for our elementary school students. So thank you for doing your best for us. I do want to say I'm so glad that we're back in the schoolroom now with the hybrid model, with my children being able to be there 2 full days a week. I have 3 children in Newport News Public Schools, one in Menchville, one in Woodside, and one in Yates. I want to support the Griffin's proposal that if there are seats available on 4 days, I would love that for my children. I want to encourage you throughout the days ahead. The more we can be open, the more we can have opportunity for that, the better. I think we've reached a point in this pandemic where there are 2 threats. The threat of the pandemic has been, and COVID has been obvious to us for quite some time. But those of us who rely too much on the isolating video schooling, this is just an inferior experience, I'm afraid. I myself am an educator at the university level, and I first taught on video on the internet 15 years ago. And I noticed the best students could still do just fine. But for 80–90% of them that were less motivated, the virtual schooling was just not as good because it's completely on the student's initiative. And this is on the university level with 18 through 21-year-olds. I mean, imagine how self-motivated an 8-year-old is or a 12-year-old. I mean, I believe it when I hear about kids on Xboxes. I know my kids are straight-A students and good kids, but they still like to roll over at 8:29 and turn on the computer at 8:30. And I told them from day one that they're not going to learn as much that way. And I pressured them to do the work anyway and not have the video game on their phone while they're watching the video screen. So all that to say, please guard us against this other threat, the threat of the isolation, the obesity, the depression that can come from being isolated. There are a lot of negative correlations with this, from obesity to depression to anxiety. So please bring our kids back as quickly as we can. But thank you for your service. I know this is, of all the times to be in a position on the school board, this has got to be amongst the most challenging. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Silverman. All right. Next card I have is Ms. Christina Silverman. All right, we'll move forward to the next card I have is Ms. Heather Snell.
okay to take this off? Thank you. Good evening, everybody. All right, so the Commonwealth of Virginia has enacted new legislation which now allows for public sector unions to bargain for employee rights and their conditions of employment. On May 1st, 2021, Virginia's new law will take effect. Dr. Martin Luther King is quoted to say, "The freedom of collective bargaining has improved wages and working conditions for everyone. Wherever these right-to-work, anti-collective bargaining laws have been passed, wages are lower, job opportunities are fewer, and there are no civil rights. The labor movement did not diminish the strength of the nation, but enlarged it. Those who today attack labor forget these simple truths, but history remembers them." End quote. Through collective bargaining, working people and unions have higher wages, better benefits, and safer workplaces. In the United States, 3/4 of private sector workers and 2/3 of public employees have the right to collective bargaining. Teachers in 88% of the country currently have collective bargaining. Now is the time for the state that's ranked dead last for workers to join the rest of the country. We all know teachers' pay is on the low end of the scale, and Virginia teachers especially, as we rank 32nd in the nation for teacher salaries. I thank you, Mr. Brown, where are you? Mr. Brown, for your advocacy in the past for higher teacher and staff pay. But I would also like to know, will you and the rest of the school board allow teachers the ability to join the rest of the country to advocate for themselves for better pay and benefits? Will the board go on record today in support of restoring the balance of economic power in our country through collective bargaining agreements for teachers and staff? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The next card that I have is Ms. Mary Voss.
Hello. Mary Voss, NNPS parent, teacher, and graduate. The CDC guidance, even after recent updates, continues to call for a reduced attendance hybrid model to drastically reduce the spread of potentially deadly COVID-19 transmission in schools. With African American and Latinx populations at 5 times greater risk of severe COVID, it is important to follow the CDC guidance to protect public health. Schedule changes are also confusing for families and tend to worsen student attendance. With just 11 weeks left in the school year, it doesn't make sense to change student schedules once again. I definitely understand the frustration with this pandemic and wishing it would be over, but many people are still unvaccinated and still at high risk, as much as we may wish things to be back to normal. Also tonight, I want to speak about collective bargaining. Please support collective bargaining rights for NNPS employees. Virginia is one of just 3 states in the nation that prohibits teachers, staff, firefighters, first responders, and other public employees from having a seat at the bargaining table to negotiate their contracts. This sad state of affairs contributes to Virginia ranking dead last in the nation in workers' rights. Please keep in mind that teacher-staff working conditions are student learning conditions, so allowing educators to negotiate for better working conditions also benefits students. Approving collective bargaining would also make NNPS a highly sought-after district to work for. This May 1st, it becomes legal for localities to opt in to collective bargaining for public employees. Please support this important labor right that is already enjoyed by Virginia's private sector employees and by most education workers across the country. And I'd like to share some research on collective bargaining. Educators bargain for the common good, whether it's smaller class sizes, less screen time, more social workers, or additional after-school programs. Labor unions and teachers unions bargain for the common good. Collective bargaining is a standard labor practice. The right to negotiate contracts through unions and education associations is an industry standard for educators in the vast majority of the country. Newport News can position itself on the right side of progress by ensuring its school employees enjoy basic labor rights. A 2018 study found that collective bargaining is associated with higher test scores on standardized tests in areas where educator contracts are strong. Collective bargaining helps retain and attract the best talent. This helps us to increase property values, to create a prepared workforce. High quality education improves the well-being of any community, so collective bargaining is good for the community as well. This was a really significant statistic. 22% of teachers in Virginia currently without collective bargaining, only 22% return to their school after their first year. This number increases to almost 50% after 4 years. Unfair contracts lead to teacher burnout. Collectively bargained contracts help improve working conditions and prevent educator burnout. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Voss. All right, the next card that I have is Chanel Hurt.
Hello, thank you for having me. I hope you all are well. My name is Chanel Hurt. I'm a middle and high school teacher and proud union member. Tonight I'll be speaking as an individual in support of collective bargaining, legislation that becomes available for public education workers as of May 1st. Virginia comes in dead last for workers' rights and conditions. We have a long history of anti-labor, and we would be perpetuating many systems of supremacy if we denied public education workers the opportunity to collectively bargain. Anti-labor laws and support were created so that the wealthy elite could protect their property and profits over the lives of the people who maintained that property and profit. Being anti-labor is classist and racist and prevents change for the people that carry this society. To agree to collective bargaining with your employees is an opportunity to play an even more active role in dismantling those systems. By supporting and allowing collective bargaining, we work towards structural change in our workplaces, changes that benefit all education workers. Just as a doctor's working conditions are a patient's healing conditions, or a server's working conditions, the eating and drinking conditions of their patrons, educator working conditions are student learning conditions. And by improving the working conditions of staff, we would be better supporting students and their families. Collective bargaining is just better for business. Collective bargaining is negotiation. It's communication. It's a real relationship that looks to understand the needs and wants of one another. It's transformative, a new way of doing things, one that would move us away from the trauma we have felt in this 7-day period alone. Collective bargaining is a physical form of love, understanding, and compassion. It's love for a better way for all of us. It's understanding that we all deserve a life where our basic needs are met. It's compassion for the other human being across the table. It's an alignment of values, and even more than before, it's important we take every chance to do that, so that people cannot question who we are or who we are not. They will see the work we do, the values we live for, and know that we truly want the best for education. It's what can propel our district forward. By supporting collective bargaining, you are coming to the aid of public education in Newport News and surrounding areas. And it comes at the perfect time as we look for creative solutions to school reopenings. It's Virginia history in the making, and we should be a part of it. Thank you for your time. Please have a good rest of your meeting and take care.
Thank you, Ms. Hurd. I want to thank everyone for complying with our time. And so as we have not run past our 30-minute time limit yet, we may be able to get through the rest of our cards. So the next speaker is William Huberdeau.
You pronounced that pretty well. Nice job. Good evening. My name's Will Huberdeau, and I teach 11th grade English at Warwick High School. And I'm speaking to you very briefly today to encourage your support of collective bargaining for all teachers and staff to have a fair say in their contracts and to lead clear expectations of our responsibilities and rights while performing our heroic duties. And I really think the simple ask should be enough. I considered giving you a learning target and some success criterion, but I realized this needn't be a lesson. This doesn't even need to be a long speech. It's just a simple request. We want collective bargaining. You have the power to give it, so please do. It's plain, simple fairness, courtesy, and best practice in labor relations. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next speaker I have is Mr. John Krikorian.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo some sentiments of my some friends and neighbors who also have students in our school system. With the experience that I've had over the last month with my 3 children. 1 month ago, there was an incredible amount of fear and anxiety about going back to school. And what I have seen in drop-offs and pickups and interactions with teachers and families and my own children is an incredible sense of just renewed purpose and spirit and confidence that we can do this and that we can do it safely. And we would not be doing that if not for our teachers and our staff, many of whom are here. Some are of my own children, and I couldn't be more thankful to all of them. This is an incredibly difficult time to be a teacher, and to witness firsthand, walking to the school, to see the sacrifices being made by all of them to make this work has been inspiring. So thank you. It has been wonderful. My goal today is just to help you understand that I think we can push it forward. With the CDC guidelines that we've recently seen in the studies, and 3 feet possibly being just as safe and effective as 6, I share the same experience with my middle school and high school daughter, where they're in a class of 2 or 3 people. It is my belief that if we have empty seats and we have students that are willing and able to fill them, we should aim to fill those seats. And then just as soon as we can, we should be adding seats. If we can do it safely, equitably, I really believe that this will help us. Some might say we only have 11 weeks left, and then it'll be summer. 3 months is a long time in the life of a child, and we can accomplish much in 3 months to continue to eliminate the fear and anxiety and show that we can do this, so that we can have the confidence to say yes in the fall. Might not be normal, but we can have full-time, in-person learning opportunities for the students of Newport News. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Our next card is Miss Elizabeth Spurlin.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have a bit of a departure from the rest of the comments this evening. Restraint policies and practices are a direct threat to our children. Research shows that disabled and or BIPOC children are at disproportionately higher risk of being subjected to restraint and therefore injury or death. We cannot have a policy that allows restraint and refuses to acknowledge that truth. From reports between 2014 and just last year, NPR June 2014, national data confirms cases of restraint and seclusion in public schools. An analysis by ProPublica and NPR of data for the 2011-12 school year from U.S. Department of Education shows restraint and seclusion were used at least 267,000 times nationwide. That includes 163,000 instances in which students were restrained. Mechanical restraints were used 7,600 of those times. In 75% of those cases, it was kids with disabilities who were restrained or secluded. In a paper published in Advances in Neurodevelopmental Disorders, May 2020, titled Exploring the Disproportionate Use of Restraint and Seclusion Among Students with Disabilities, Boys, and Students of Color, quote, in schools with reported use of restraint or seclusion, students with disabilities were 200% more likely to be subjected to restraint or seclusion relative to their peers. Similarly, Black students were almost 200% more likely, and Hispanic students were 45% more likely to experience restraint or seclusion than their white counterparts. In Vice, November 2020, deadly restraints are being used on children at youth homes and schools. Quote, in 2012, the Department of Education published guidelines, principles for the use of all types of physical restraint. They're supposed to be for emergency safety interventions and only used when a child puts themselves or someone else in imminent danger. But it is hard to tell whether this guidance is being followed. There is no comprehensive data on how often physical restraints occur or what prompts them, nor does the government track how many children are injured or killed in restraints, end quote. How can you suggest that any proposed policy that continues to allow restraint of children is based on best data and practices when the preponderance of evidence that does exist shows a lack of transparency and disproportionate threat of harm and death among marginalized children? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perla.
Thank you.
And before I go to our last speaker, I'm just going to ask, do we have any additional cards?
No, sir.
No additional cards. All right. Well, our last speaker is a former student rep, and so when you are a former student rep, you get to have as much time as you like. So, Mr. Lambert, we're so excited to have you come back and speak to us. It's been a few years since you've been one of our student reps.
Yes, but I'm excited to be back and speaking to you all. I know most of you, and I am sure I will get to know those that I don't. And I promise not to abuse your time privileges. So there are a lot of issues that you deal with meeting to meeting. Budgets, curriculums, a variety of puzzle pieces that you need to fit together to find the best answer, because there's never one right answer. There's never an absolute right or an absolute wrong in what you do, except in a very few cases. And this is what we're talking about tonight: absolute right and absolute wrong. Article 23 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights reminds us that the right to collectively bargain belongs to all. This is a worldwide statement, not a provision, but a statement of the principles to which we all hold already. It has long been the peculiar institution of 3 states, in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, to deny this freedom in labor. We need little education to see why it was those 3 states alone that did so, following a war in which their infrastructure was torn, in which they needed workers. It was convenient to keep these public sector workers from enjoying any rights. Even if they had to be paid, they could never have a voice at the table. Not then, not ever. But the Confederacy's never has come to an end, and you have the power to push that further. Beginning in May, you will all have a chance to change that last vestige of Confederacy and Jim Crow. You will have a chance to inscribe your names forever as the men and women who looked at the outrageous origins of this ban and the outrageous effects of this practice and said, no more. 100,000 union members around Virginia are wondering, which side are you on? There will be no more important vote that you take this year or next year, and quite possibly in your tenure on this board. It is not difficult to see the consequences of this peculiar institution. Teachers everywhere work hours far longer than they are capable of, far longer than they're paid to. They have budgets that require them to pay out of pockets for supplies. Their overtime pay is non-existent. The standard steps in their pay raises have not been met. The answer to this, from all of you, and I have taken it in good faith when I have heard it from every single one of you, has been, we don't have the money. The budget can't be stretched further. It's wrong, and there's nothing we can do. So if this is the reason that our teachers are treated so poorly, that there is no other way without money on hand, then empower them to do something about it. If you are as angry as our teachers are about the shortages that come from the city and the Commonwealth in their funding, about the dilapidated buildings that I and so many others had to go to school in, then let them join you in this advocacy. We all trust our greatest asset, our children, to our teachers every day, whether it be virtually or at some undetermined date soon, in person. We make that commitment. So let's extend that same hand of partnership to trust the teachers to sit at tables where decisions are being made that affect them and act responsibly as adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. All right. Do we have any additional cards?
No, sir.
All right. No additional cards? Then we will move on. Thank you all for speaking tonight, and we will follow up with you. Superintendent will be following up with you at a later date. We'll move on to Section 3 of our agenda, which is our consent agenda. It includes 3.01 minutes from the work session on February 16, 2021, 3.02 minutes from the regular meeting on February 16, 2021, 3.03 minutes from the joint meeting with the City Council on February 3rd, 2021, 3.04 financial reports, including the revenue report for January and February 2021, the expense report for January and February 2021, and the Child Nutrition Services report for February 2021. 3.05, the personnel report. 3.06, our VSBA Business Honor Roll nominees, which are Bayport Credit Union, Life Enrichment Center, and Lighthouse Church. And 3.07, budget transfer. At this time, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Dr. Best. Any discussion? All right. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Amon?
4.
Dr. Best? 4. Mr. Ely? Mr. Harris?
Marvin Harris, 4.
Mr. Hunter?
Gary Hunter, 4.
Mrs. Searles Law?
4.
Mr. Brown?
Ms. Brown, 4.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, thank you. So the next item on our agenda is Section 4, action items, and that is our proposed school calendar. And Dr. Barker, do you have a presentation before we?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We, at the last board meeting, we mentioned that we were administering a survey for our public and our staff regarding the two options for a proposed calendar. Mrs. Brooks is here to provide that data for the viewers this evening and the board, and we will ask the board to take action tonight on one of those options. Mrs. Brooks?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parker. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, members of the board, and again, Dr. Parker. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share highlights from the community survey that we conducted to gather input regarding our two calendar proposals for next school year. This was the first time that the calendar committee proposed two options for your consideration, given the challenges that next school year has presented, as well as the opportunities. Last month, we reported that there were several school divisions on the peninsula that were considering a start prior to the Labor Day holiday, which, as you know, is now allowed by the Code of Virginia. So we included that option in our survey, as well as an option to start after the Labor Day holiday. So in terms of the two proposals, the pre-Labor Day option of starting schools on Monday, August 30th, would allow our schools to more quickly address the learning loss that occurred due to COVID-19. Now, starting after the Labor Day holiday on Wednesday, September 8th, would allow students to begin school on the same day and have a common first day of school experience, given the religious holiday that occurs during that week. So we conducted a very brief survey during the last 2 weeks of February that contained information about both calendar proposals, and these are the results. So of the 2,999 responses received, 74% were from families, 23% were from employees, and 3% were from students and other community members. Regarding when school should begin, 53% of the respondents preferred to start school on Wednesday, September 8th, versus 37% of the respondents who favored a pre-Labor Day or Monday, August 30th start. Now, over 600 comments were submitted through the survey. By far, the most frequent comment or concern was the lack of notice given to families and employees that the school division was considering a pre-Labor Day start. Families, employees, and others stated the need for more time to plan more appropriately for an August start. Now, there were frequent comments that starting school in August would yield a much earlier into the school year, like around the Memorial Day holiday, but in both of our proposals, we went into the second week of June. And teachers working in our robust summer instructional program would like less time off this summer before returning to school, would have less time off this summer before returning to school in the fall under the pre-Labor Day calendar. Now, other respondents stated that starting school before Labor Day was a great opportunity to ease the transition back to a regular routine for students. And many individuals also commented that students who could not return this current year for hybrid instruction for medical or family reasons would benefit from an earlier start in the fall. Now, regarding the Wednesday, September 8th or post-Labor Day start, many people commented that it was essential for families to have a more traditional summer break after this pandemic year. And respondents also stated that starting school in September would give students and families more time to get vaccinated. Now, maintaining the traditional school schedule was frequently stated as a way to help students transition back to school fully in person. And lastly, there were several comments in support of the post-Labor Day calendar because it would allow students with summer jobs more time and opportunity to work through that last major summer holiday. So when we surveyed the school divisions on the peninsula, and as you know, for the past few years, we've worked together to have a regional calendar. But as we stated, next year has been a very different in terms of all of the opportunities that it's presented us. But we surveyed the school divisions on the peninsula regarding their start dates for next school year. And as of today, only Poquoson, Williamsburg, James City County, and York County have board-approved calendars. And of those three school divisions, Williamsburg and York County will be opening pre-Labor Day. So that concludes my report. Dr. Parker was going to provide next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. So, Mr. Chairman, we've taken the steps to get the information to the board necessary to at least make a decision if the board is in agreement to either select a pre-Labor Day or a post-Labor Day start for the 21-22 school year. However, we do have some, because we will be our one-to-one school division, device-to-student school division, we will have opportunities next year to provide some level of professional development for our teachers, and we would like to make sure that the calendar that is passed by the school board reflects any professional development days for staff in that calendar that is approved, rather than adding days during the school year next year. We'd like to give our parents and our staff as much notice as possible in that calendar. So what I am proposing and requesting, Mr. Chairman, is that the board take a vote on whether they support a pre or post Labor Day. And if you are so inclined, I would like to have my staff take the calendar back to the school calendar committee and work with our teachers and our administrators to come back with the calendar for the board to approve in April.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. So with that, at this time, what we will do is we will vote on a pre or post Labor Day calendar. And then in April, the superintendent will bring back the revised calendar for the board's approval of the detailed calendar. So at this time, we have two dates that are before us. Because we have two dates, may I have a motion to approve a September 8th start to our school year next year? May I have a motion for that date?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that our start date for next school year is September 8th.
All right. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Best. All right. Time for discussion. Any questions? All right. There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Amon?
4.
Dr. Best?
4.
Mr. Ely?
4.
Mr. Harris?
Marvin Harris, 4.
Mr. Hunter?
Gary Hunter, 4.
Mrs. Searles Law?
Lisa Searles Law, 4.
Mr. Brown?
Douglas Brown, 4.
Motion carries 7-0 for post-Labor Day start.
All right, so with that, then our start to the next school year will be September the 8th. Dr. Parker is going to go back and do a revision to our calendar to provide a detailed calendar that will have all the professional development days in there as well as all the school holidays. So we'll have that for action in the April meeting. And then, as I understand, Dr. Parker, the board is interested in looking at a pre-Labor Day start for the following school year. So at this time, we would ask you to work for the 22-23 school year on a pre-Labor Day start calendar for that following year.
And Mr. Chairman, if the board is so inclined, I would like my staff to have the flexibility to bring that calendar to you in the fall. I think we've surveyed our constituents twice, and in both of those surveys, there was indication that getting the calendar to the community in the April timeframe does not allow enough time for planning family engagements or other things. So if the board is so inclined, we will bring a calendar in the fall to the board, which has not been our protocol in the past, but it will allow enough time and flexibility if the board is so inclined to act on that calendar to give almost as close to a full year of notice for staff and families if there is an adjustment in the school start time.
Thank you. And that is, as we understand it, those were the majority of the comments in the survey were that parents and other stakeholders in the community wanted more time to prepare themselves for a pre-Labor Day start. So the fall of next year will give us that opportunity. All right, then the next item on our agenda is 4.02, which is a policy chapter F revisions. And Dr. Parker, do you have a presentation for that?
I think Mrs. Brooks has presented that information. There was one policy that has been tabled for further discussion. If the board has any questions regarding that, Mrs. Brooks is standing by to answer any questions.
All right. And as I understand, I believe that's policy FB, and that has been tabled. So the policies that are in your packet are the policies to be revised. And so what I would ask at this time, board members have had a chance to review those policies. Would I please have a motion for the policies that are in your packet on Chapter F?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the policy chapter review be approved.
All right. Thank you for the we have a motion. Is there a second?
Marvin Harris, second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harris. All right. Time for discussion. Are there any questions? Yes, Madam Vice Chair.
I just have a comment. I just want to say thank you to facilities and others' collaboration to get our policies up to date in this area of our policy work. So thank you, Ms. Brooks, for leading that.
All right.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Any other comments or questions? All right, there being none, then Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Allen?
4.
Dr. Best?
4.
Mr. Ely?
4.
Mr. Harris?
Harris, 4.
Mr. Hunter?
Gary Hunter, 4.
Mrs. Searles Law?
4.
Mr. Brown?
Brown, 4.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right. Then that will move us on to the large item of this evening, which is 4.03, our FY22 budget approval. And Dr. Parker, I do believe you have a few words before we vote on that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Since when we presented the budget to the board earlier this March, we just received additional information from the state on that same day. So we have had a chance to process that additional state information, and tonight Mrs. Rousseau will present just some adjustment to that proposed budget for FY22, which it was favorable for the school division and our staff. So, Mrs. Rousseau, if you'll present that new information, the board has for the board's consideration as we look at passing the approval of the FY2022 operating budget.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. I'm happy to do that. Good evening, Mr. Brown, Ms. Searles Law, members of the board. As Dr. Parker said, since we presented the budget information to you 2 weeks ago, we received updated information from the state, and based on that information, we expect to receive $12.1 million in new revenue from the state instead of the $10.7 million we reported to you previously. That is a 5.9% increase over this year in state revenue and a 3.7% increase overall. So we have some suggestions for you this evening about what we might do with that. We're recommending a few more changes to compensation to you this evening. First, as we reported to you previously, we had not finished the work on the teacher scales. We were able to get our goal of 1.5% between each year of service from 15 to 30 years and still had years 1 to 14 to do. We're recommending this evening that we take $1 million of the additional $1.4 million in additional revenue and adjust the teacher scale for years 12 through 14. That leaves years 1 through 11 at 1.25% apart, with all other years at 1.5% apart. We're also recommending some adjustments to our nurse and bus driver scales to ensure that we stay competitive in the market for these critical positions. The adjustments that we're recommending for the teacher scale will result, if you want to move the next slide, Michelle. Thank you. The adjustments we're recommending for the teacher scale will result in teacher raises ranging from 3.7% to 7.5%. Earlier, the range was 3.7 to 6.7%, so this is an improvement for many of our teachers. In the table at the bottom of this slide, you can see that the grade adjustments for nurses, treatment nurses, bus drivers, and bus assistants will result in many of these employees getting more than the 3% general increase. Most individuals in these groups will receive an experience adjustment based on where they should be placed on the new scale. Some are already where they should be placed on the scale, but most will receive an adjustment. You can see the range of adjustments for nurses is 3% to 10.7%. For treatment nurses, the range is 3% to 10.6%. For bus drivers, 3% to 7.2%. And for bus assistants, from 3% to 7.8%. Those adjustments will be effective for those employees July 1st. You can see that the adjustments are largely from the change in the grades for those positions. You can see the nurse grades and treatment nurse grades are going from 35 to 37 and 28 to 30, respectively. Bus drivers from grade 21 to grade 22, and bus assistants from grade 11 to grade 12. So hopefully these changes will meet the school board's approval, because we're going to ask you to approve the budget this evening. The funds that require your approval are shown here. And that completes my comments this evening, Dr. Parker.
Thank you, Mary Lou. So, Mr. Chairman, we stand by for any questions that the board may have and ask for your support and approval this evening.
All right. Any questions at this time? Yes, Madam Vice Chair.
So, Dr. Parker, can we make sure it's shared, if you would review again, what the range of teacher possible salary increases will encompass? We've had a couple of questions from the community regarding that.
Certainly. The next slide, Mrs. Price. This slide, the next slide represents at the top represents the resulting salary increases for teachers based on their experience level in the school division. Those ranges would be 3.7 to 7.5%. As you're aware, previously our most experienced teachers, grade years 15 through 31, we needed to do a little more to make sure that their salary was more competitive. So our veteran teachers will probably see the more higher percentage as they move up on the to 1.5% separation on the salary scale. This is the second year we've been able to make such an adjustment. Beginning April 1st, we made the similar experience adjustment in this year's budget, the FY21 budget. So we feel that we've made some adequate progress and representative to the school divisions in this region in making sure that our teachers have a very competitive salary.
Thank you.
Ms. Amon.
So just to clarify, from April 1st to what they can expect next year, you're going to have 3 and then this in addition to.
Yes. Mr. Rousseau, do you have those percentages for this year in front of you?
No, I don't. But what I recall for the teachers, Dr. Parker, was 3.5% to 5.2% this year, and then 3.7 to 7.5 for next year. I think those are close.
Okay, so that's on top of.
That's on, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Addition.
Yes, those are additive, Ms. Amon. That's correct.
All right. Additional questions?
In fact, really, actually, they're really better than additive, because the increase for next year is on top of the increase this year, so it's really more than cumulative in terms of adding the percentage.
Yeah, exponential.
All right. Well, Mr. So, the question I have is in the era of raises, where does this rank in the level of raises that we've given? Is this the largest or amongst the largest ever?
It's probably real close to the largest during my tenure, Mr. Brown.
All right. So I'll just to summarize, in the era of a pandemic and when we received no additional funding, gross dollar amount from our locality we have been able to give the largest raise that we've ever been able to give to our teaching staff. So I just want to, well, we haven't voted yet, but
Tell which way we're headed.
Right,
now.
haven't voted yet, but to the board, I do appreciate all the work and the effort, and to the staff, to Dr. Parker, I appreciate all the work and the effort that's gone into this year and making it what it has been up to this point. All right. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to approve our budget.
Mr. Chairman?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes, Mr. Ely?
Being that there's extra money in the budget, is it possible that we can allocate some of that money towards insurance premiums, so insurance premiums to stay the same as they is right now instead of going up on employees?
So, Mr. Ely, we certainly could make that make that action. And so what I'll recommend is that we'll take our motion, and if you would like to amend the motion, then you could do so.
But just to be clear, there is no extra money. We presented a balanced budget, so it's so the budget is balanced based on the recommendations for the increase for bus drivers and school nurses, and the work on and the compensation on the further compensation on the scale. So it's either or, not an and.
Right.
In terms of that work.
All right. Thank you.
All
Okay.
right, thank you.
So I believe that Madam Vice Chair, you have made a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like a motion that we adopt the budget as presented by the superintendent as our budget.
All right. Is there a second? All right. All right. Any discussion? All right. There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Amon?
4.
Dr. Best? 4. Mr. Ely?
4.
Mr. Harris?
Marvin Harris, 4.
Mr. Hunter?
Gary Hunter, 4.
Mrs. Searles Law?
Lisa Searles Law, 4.
And Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, 4.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. And so now I will say congratulations. It is an honor to preside over our largest budget increase that we've ever done, and really appreciate that all the hard work and effort that's gone in during a pandemic to make this happen. Very appreciative of the work of my colleagues here on the board. All right, we'll move on to Section 5, Reports and Information, and 5.01 is an update on our Return to Learn plan. So, Dr. Parker, I'm sure there's lots of interest in this one.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to say thank our staff for pulling, again, another report together for the board and the community on our Return to Learn. I'll preface the presentation this evening by reminding the community a few weeks ago when we presented our revised Return to Learn plan. I quoted the governor as saying that we needed to remain flexible in terms of how we respond to this pandemic. There will be new information coming out periodically that requires us to rethink and readjust our approach to providing a quality education under these circumstances. And since saying that a few weeks back, we've had 2 adjustments come out from the CDC. We've had a new further guidance from the VDH and the Virginia Department of Education, and we just had this information from the CDC come out with 3-foot separation. So we are continuing to look at how we can continue to manage instruction in our classrooms, the safety of our staff and students, as we move forward with new information, new studies, and a better approach. So I continue to encourage the community to remain flexible. We will continue to make adjustments, and we'll continue to listen to you and the needs of your children as we move forward with our Return to Learn planning. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Rousseau. She'll go over some information regarding our safety aspects and statistics. And then we always include some instructional information in our Return to Learn updates. So, Mrs. Rousseau.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parker. Good evening again, board members. I would like to start our update with a look at the case rates and positivity rates that we have for you this evening. As perhaps you know, the CDC has revised the indicators and thresholds used to report community transmission of COVID-19. The case rate and positivity rate are still the data points that are used to track our progress in containing the virus, but they are now presented on a 7-day basis instead of the previous 14-day basis. The chart on the left is updated on a weekly basis, and the CDC provides this data for use by school divisions in determining what mitigation strategies are recommended based on the level of community transmission. You can see that there are 4 levels of transmission: low, moderate, substantial, and high. You can see where Newport News is at the moment, and we're in the high level of transmission. You can look at our case rate, 136, and our percentage of positive tests is 10.2%, both in the high rate of transmission. The chart on the right is VDH data and is updated daily, so it has more recent data. You can see the date on the left part of the slide is 3/13. These are, I took these from the website this morning, and the data on the right is dated today. So it is more recent data. It tracks the same 2 data sets, case rate and positivity, but you can see that it reports the daily case rate. So that 23.9 is the daily case rate. It also reports the trend in both data sets, and both of them actually show the trend from the beginning of the pandemic. So you can see that the lines are fairly similar. But the VDH data also shows whether the trend is increasing or decreasing or fluctuating. You can see that our case rate has been increasing for the past 10 days. And as long as it's been under 14 days, you consider that fluctuating. So you can see that that'll be reported on our dashboard as fluctuating. The case rate here is shown as 9.5%, and it's decreasing. It's been decreasing for over 70 days. And that's a good sign. Of a little concern that the case rate has been up for the last 10 days, but hopefully that will get back to a downward trend. Looking at the next slide, there are 4 thresholds, as I mentioned: low, moderate, substantial, and high. And you can see that case rates greater than 100 are considered high transmission. And as I mentioned and saw in the earlier slide, we're at 136 currently in Newport News, so we are still considered to be in high transmission. Our case rate is currently 10.2%, so again, it's also in the high level. But you saw on the VDH data that our case rate was 9.5, and so should it trend down, we would perhaps next week be in a substantial transmission. But note that the note at the bottom is the 2 indicators suggest different levels. The actions corresponding to the higher threshold should be chosen. So we would still, as long as our case rate is over 100, the CDC guidance recommends that we operate under high transmission guidelines. So looking at the next slide, as Dr. Parker indicated, there have been some recent changes to the CDC guidance, and the most impactful for us and for everyone probably is the physical distancing guidance that lowers the space between students from 6 feet to 3 feet in some circumstances. And we'll look at that a little more closely in just a minute. Also, there was some clarification that ventilation is a component of strategies to clean and maintain healthy facilities, of course we've been working on that. They removed a recommendation for physical barriers, and we've done a limited amount of that because of the science around it. They've clarified the role of community transmission levels, and we've just talked about those in decision making, and then added guidance on interventions when clusters occur. So let's look at what they haven't changed. And on the next slide are the prevention strategies that they recommend still to reduce transmission of COVID in schools. And they're very familiar to you now and to all of our staff and students. Most important probably, universal and correct use of masks and physical distancing. We have required students and staff to wear masks. I'd like to remind parents this evening to please remember that your students are expected to arrive at the bus stop, if they're riding a bus, or to school wearing their masks. Masks are required on our buses and in our schools for both students and staff. Physical distancing, we've been using 6 foot guidance up until now, and we're now working to determine how the revised guidance can be implemented in our schools. Hand washing and respiratory etiquette is something we continue to emphasize to all of our students and staff. Our custodial staff is continuing to clean throughout the day in each facility. I've heard many compliments on how clean our schools are, so I want to thank our custodial staff for their hard work making that happen. And on the issue of contact tracing, I want to thank our nurses who've continued to work with the health department on contact tracing. This is important work to keep our staff and students safe. In addition to the training that our nurses took on contact tracing, many have also stepped up to be vaccinators to help our staff and other members of the community receive their vaccinations. I've heard nothing but praise for our nurses, so I want to thank them this evening for the work that they've done. You can see that no matter the changes in the CDC guidance, the two things that they continue to highlight as being the most important are correct and universal use of masks and physical distancing to be maximized to the greatest extent possible. So let's look at what the new physical distancing guidelines say. So the distance that is recommended between students in classrooms in elementary schools is now 3 feet. And that doesn't matter, it doesn't matter for that what the level of transmission of COVID is in the community. So for our youngest learners, they can be safely 3 feet apart. In middle schools and high schools, though, the recommendation is that students should be 3 feet apart unless the community transmission is high, in which case 6 feet of physical distancing should still be used. So remember that we are still in high transmission in Newport News. So at this time, the CDC recommendation for our secondary schools would still be 6 feet. And they still recommend 6 feet of distance between adults and students at all times in the school building, as well as when masks cannot be worn and during certain activities, as you can see on the slide. I asked our plant services staff to look at our most common classroom sizes at each level of school to determine what our classroom capacities would be at 3 feet of distance between students. And those are shown here for you. I just want to explain a little bit. So, you know, we do not have one universal size of classroom in any school, and I think most of you realize that. So these are the most common size of classrooms in our schools. And let me also say that some of our classrooms, you know, may have a row of cabinetry down the side. They may have additional equipment in the classroom. So this is, for example, in early childhood, 16 by 20 of clear space. And in that area, you'd be able to place 10 students at 3 foot distance. And so it goes throughout the rest of this. So this just gives you an idea of what the range for capacity would be in each size of classroom and how many kids would be able to get there safely at 3 feet. Now, remember at secondary, right now in Newport News, based on the CDC guidance, it's still recommended that we have them at 6 feet of distance. So hopefully we'll get to the point where 3 feet is safe, and particularly when we return to school next fall, so you can see what type of capacity you can accommodate at that point. The next thing I want to update you on this evening is case investigation and contact tracing. It is an important part of our mitigation of our buildings. One thing that I want to make sure that you understand is that as we consider reducing the physical distancing, and that is the definition of a close contact. If you note the last bullet on this slide, schools that use less than 6 feet between students in classrooms still would need to use the same definition of a close contact, which is someone who was within 6 feet for a total of 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. So if students are sitting 3 feet apart and a student has COVID symptoms or is positive, those within 6 feet of that student will need to be quarantined. So it would perhaps expand the number of children that would be quarantined if we were to have a positive case or a child with COVID-like symptoms. So I just want to make sure that the community does understand that. I want to talk a little bit next about the quarantine guidance. Again, this is guidance from the CDC. And this is the guidance that our health department has recommended that we follow, particularly while the area is in high transmission. Any student or staff member that is identified as a close contact, I just gave you the criteria for that, of a positive case or a close contact of someone that is presumed to be positive will be quarantined for 14 days. If the individual that is presumed to be positive is tested and receives a negative result or is diagnosed as having another condition, those that were quarantined will be notified that they can return to school or work. I'd like you to note the underlined comment. If staff have been fully vaccinated or tested positive in the last 3 months and don't have symptoms, they will not have to quarantine. We have seen the benefit of many of our staff being vaccinated just in the past few weeks. Several that have been identified as close contacts have not had to quarantine. So that's really helpful to all concerned. And, you know, I want to thank all of our team that have been volunteers, both our nurses as well as a lot of our HR staff who have volunteered at the CNU site to help our staff get vaccinated. It's really helped a lot of people. So next, I want to look at, change the topic a little bit to the child nutrition update. And first looking at our Meals to Go schedule. I think most folks are familiar with this, but I just wanted to give you a brief update. When students are learning virtually, meals are still available for them. Monday through Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. at all of our elementary schools, the Marshall Early Learning Center, and the middle schools are listed on the slide. And then from 4:30 to 5:30, they're available at the high schools that are shown here. All of the meal service information is on our website, so it's easily accessible by everyone. I do want to mention some additional food assistance for our families this evening, though. This is a little more recent information. In addition to the meals that we provide, we want to let families know that they will be again receiving PEBT assistance. For those that received the benefit earlier in the year or last year, the benefits will be available on the same cards. For newly enrolled families, a card will be sent in the mail. This program is managed by the Virginia Department of Social Services. They began releasing benefits last week retroactively for October through January. Later this week, they'll release benefits monthly through July. So families can look forward to that assistance. And if you have questions about that, the Virginia Department of Social Services is really the best source for answers. But our staff will be glad to help if they can. So Dr. Parker, that completes my part of the presentation, and I'll turn it over, I think, to Dr. Manglemont.
Thank you. Dr. Manglemont?
Good evening, Chairman Brown, Vice Chair Stovall, members of the board. Pleasure to be here tonight, Dr. Parker. My goal tonight is just to provide you a glance into our enrollment for in-person instruction. But since I'm here, I'm also going to talk a little bit, take a short period of time to talk about some of the good things that are happening within our buildings and across the division. Since we began in-person instruction, you can see that our numbers really mirror what our intent survey data from our families provided in December shows us. So you can see that our largest enrollments are in our early learners and in our special populations. And then as our students get older, our numbers dwindle. But that's kind of to be expected because as students get older, they become more self-directed in their learning style and they take a little bit more ownership of their learning. But having said that, with the low numbers, we have an opportunity to think a little bit more creatively and strategically about how we can optimize our space and provide more focused supports for our students. We're currently pulling detailed reports to share with building principals and their teams. We are looking at enrollment trends, and not just trends by the building, but actual in classrooms too. So what do the classrooms look like? We're utilizing the vulnerability index indicators, and I know you don't know a lot about that, but Dr. Gerald is going to speak to that tonight, and she'll tell you a little bit more about that. And we're blending that data with also our mid-year data for our mathematics and reading diagnostic test. So with all of that pulled together, we're going to provide data to our buildings so they can work more strategically to provide those focused supports to students who are not finding success, whether they're at home or they're in person, and to provide other supports for students who have different needs based on the vulnerability index. Our plan is to personalize our supports and to reach out to specific students and their families to develop academic plans through the rest of the academic year. We are also currently working on extended learning throughout the summer. Our summer learning plan is not yet finalized, but once it's finalized, we'll bring that to you for you to look at. So as of tonight, we have been in person for 22 days for our early learners, and just a little over 2 weeks for our secondary students. And I'd like time now to just highlight a couple classrooms and other additional news to bring home the idea that whether we're at home learning or we're in person, great things are still happening for kids in Newport News. The next slide, you can see Mrs. Lisa Brooks. She's an outstanding second grade teacher at Dutrow Elementary School. And she says the in-person students are adjusting really well to everything, and they're actually doing an awesome job following our COVID rules. She wanted to highlight how concurrent learning is going for her. At the elementary level, you have to remember that the only concurrent learning takes place during the morning session, and the morning session focuses on the social emotional learning lessons. So the way that she's organizing her classroom is she has her in-person kids open their computers and log into Zoom, and at the same time she has her kids at home log into Zoom, and she posts them up on the smart board for all the other students in class to look at. They focus on classroom community, respect, mindfulness, all those great social emotional learning things. She really likes to utilize chat between the at-home and in-person kids. And yes, they're only in 2nd grade, but they love using the chat feature. And they talk to each other, they say hello. And she says that she's really noticed that the kids that are a bit more shy and intimidated speaking out to others are really, really vocal on that chat. She likes to play games to get them to turn on their cameras. She likes to play funny face games or have them mimic their specific favorite animal, and then they turn on their cameras to really engage in the lesson. She has what's called a Dolphin of the Day, Dutro Dolphins, as you can see here. And that is a special little helper that is going to pick the secret word to end the morning meeting. And they also get to choose the brain break, which is like a Go Noodle video. And if you're familiar with those, they're just like these cute little videos that kids get up and get the wiggles out. I think that she says, I think the children really value this time together so they can all spend time and see their friends, whether they're at home or in the classroom. She says being back in person with students has been great. We can do projects and activities together. And we made a stained glass egg the other day by following written directions. And we created faces imagining we had animal characteristics. She says 2nd graders still need practice using scissors, glue, and crayons, and it's nice to be able to help them hone those fine motor skills. The next classroom I'd like to talk about is a really dynamic 6th grade English team at Booker T. Washington Middle School. This English team worked together collaboratively to create a blended research module that embeds playlists for students to follow, whether they're in person or they're at home. The great thing about this is they got this idea from Catlin Tucker's playlist design, which was a division-wide PD we gave to teachers in the fall. Caitlin Tucker, the concept is each student works from an individual or assigned playlist of activities, and it pulls together a mix of activities that's designed to build specific skills. And students get the opportunity to control the pace of their learning, and the teachers customize the individual learning paths with the playlist model. So these teachers worked together to create an engaging project that incorporated data analysis, scaffolding, it allowed for student voice and choice, it personalized opportunities for varying learning abilities, and it ensured both our in-home and our in-person students were engaged in the learning and meeting the same learning objectives. You can see at the bottom, Mrs. Amy Coggin is working with a student in the classroom. And at the top, you have Mrs. Grace Rivera working with her student, while the student teacher is working at home concurrently with the other students. Another really exciting thing that happened in Newport News is the First Lady of Virginia came. So Mrs. Northam and Dr. Underwood, which is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at the Governor's Office, visited Watkins Early Childhood Center on March 18th. Both Dr. Underwood and Mrs. Northam read stories to pre-K classrooms and also went to the kitchens to thank our child nutrition staff. At this moment, I do want to put in a plug to all those parents listening at home that our pre-K registration is now open. Shameless plug. And you can go online and register right now. If you don't have access online or can't find it, please go to any Newport News school and go to the office, and they can send you to the registrar and they'll help you get registered. The next thing is that the National Art Education Association and the National Association for Music Education promoted the month of March as Youth Art Month and Music in Our Schools Month. And how perfect that Mrs. Pat Frank was just recognized here at the board meeting and the same month. So that's really kind of fun. Newport News presented our annual District Art Show, and they are doing their music performance all virtually this year. So while we're at home, that's not stopping us in Newport News, right? We're forging ahead. And you can see that all schools and all art teachers participated in the monthly activities. I mean, all, that's great. And we have our elementary virtual art exhibit, a secondary virtual art exhibit, and a virtual teacher art exhibit. And all of those can be found online on our website and on individual school websites. So look for those links. Right here, you can see that 3 of our students represented Newport News, and they're in the Virginia School Board Association Student Art Show. You can see here on the left that 3rd grader picture is Kaylon Saunders in 3rd grade at Saunders Elementary School. The middle is Sarah Zhang in 8th grade, and she's a Crittenden Middle School student. And on the right, you got Tina Wynn from 12th grade, Woodside High School. So congratulations to those students. They have beautiful artwork. On the next slide, I just want to let you all know that we have our virtual concert. It's happening, premiering on YouTube tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. The link is right there, but again, it can be found on the website. And we encourage all of you to take a mindfulness break tomorrow at 11:30 and listen to our students give a musical performance to all of us. And lastly, one of the close, near and dear to my heart, as Ms. Searles Law knows, we have Science Fair. And who would think that Science Fair could be virtual? But again, that didn't stop us. COVID is not stopping us in Newport News. We had a virtual Science Fair take place. We had 41 students submit projects to the All-City Fair. And then we had 12 of our students submit to the Tidewater Science and Engineering Fair. And you can see that 6 projects had won awards. We had 1 first place, 4 second place, and 1 third place. So congratulations to our students and the teachers that supported them along the way. The very last slide is just for all parents that are listening out there. Again, Dr. Gerald is going to come and talk about our assessment, but just reminders that we do have grade 8 writing, and of course writing that is taking place up to spring break. Then after spring break, we're jamming, we're rolling. We've got SATs, we got PSATs, CTE industry testing, and of course our SOL testing and of course testing taking place. So that ends my presentation to the board tonight. Any questions?
All right, any questions from the board? Yes, Madam Vice Chair.
Just one. Will the art and music exhibitions be put on social media?
Oh, that's a good question. We would have to ask Pat. Is she still here?
Oh, Michelle.
I don't know if we're putting it. I'm sure we
yes
are.
right here from our community.
Okay,
There you go.
great,
Yes.
great. I'm excited. Thank you.
All right, additional questions, Ms. Amon? Yes.
I do, and I'm not sure who this is for, so please feel free, whoever, to take it. On, looking at where we are and where we might be able to go even within the 6-foot distance, are we looking at giving principals some of the flexibility? I'm thinking think of the IB program. If you have 1 or 2 students, it may make sense to not separate teachers and students if that program needs more in person to get as many kids in that so that the building principals might have some flexibility within programs too if they needed to. We've seen classes of 3 to 7 personally.
I really think that parents made a very good good example tonight of ways where our schools can be a little more flexible. Now, keep in mind, when we implemented this a few weeks, we're in 2 weeks in. We knew we wanted to collect some data initially before we made any adjustments. So our principals have given us that, have been a little bit, very hesitant to make adjustments in their buildings. One, to make sure their teachers had the consistency, also that the students had consistency. But we know that we'll start rolling out some adjustments in the near future based on where we are right now. We have a lot of space in some of our classrooms where students are still learning virtually. We were hoping, and still are hoping, and I hope for those listening out there right now, we're still hoping that the students will come back and will fill some of those seats. However, in cases like this, I think we're going to meet as a team and we'll talk about what we can do at the site level to allow some flexibility in adjusting schedules. Everything has to, there are devils in the details, with transportation and other things. So we want to make sure that we have a good conversation with transportation, with the principals to make sure that they can manage any adjustments to student schedules without, for lack of better terms, creating a mess. So we want to make sure we were very thoughtful in how we go about providing that opportunity. But I definitely, hearing that young man this evening, I would definitely want to make sure that if he can sit in a classroom for 4 days and there's space available in that class and it helps him instructionally, I would want to make that happen for him.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, and that was a great segue for what Dr. Parker just said. I guess my question would be, as a division, do we have data on how many administrators, teachers have actually took the vaccine or is planning on taking the vaccine, or those that are not going to take it? And the reason I said it is because, it starts with us at the top, the building confidence. So I don't know if that's one of the reasons why parents might be hesitant to send their kids back. I'm sure there's probably multiple reasons. But I would definitely like to know what is our percentage.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question, Mr. Harris. And we have our vaccine crew here, Mrs. Hawks and Mr. Wright, who've been leading that charge, and they'll be happy to share some data.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
This evening, we estimate at this point that only 15% of our staff have opted out of the vaccine. So
wow.
we're very good,
Wow.
much more than the 25
wow.
that most people are feeling. We've got more than that. And of those staff members who have chosen to take the vaccine, we are at this point probably about 98% have received their first vaccine and around 90% have received the second. Now, as of Friday, when we vaccinate some more people, that number will go up. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Hawks.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Dr. Best.
Yes, my question was about the education plans. You talked about after the assessments. Who will develop the plan? You talked about the plans for the remainder of the school year. Who will develop the plans? Who will monitor them? And will it be uniform across the division? The expectation will be the same across the division.
Yeah. We're developing division plans right now, but we also want to personalize for students too, based on their mathematics and reading diagnostic test. So it's a little bit of like, we'll help develop the structure of which they can work, but then it will be a partnership with our building principals, their teams, and our teachers developing those plans for individual students.
Thank you.
The monitoring, and Dr. Best, we have the software that does a lot of the monitoring for us. So it's the interpretation of the data from the system is what our teachers and our building leaders do.
Okay.
Thank you. Additional questions? All right. Does that, at this time, end item 5.01?
Just a general remark, Mr. Chairman, that what we will be doing in the next few days is we are expecting the VDH and VDOE to come out with some more phased guidance twice in a month, but based on the CDC information. So upon receipt, I had a meeting with the state superintendent yesterday morning, and he mentioned that there will be further guidance coming out to address the CDC's recent changes. So we will be making some adjustments. We will be communicating and working with our staff and to principals and hearing from our teachers regarding any adjustments. But our goal is to try to get students into school as soon as possible in 4 days a week, if we can manage that safely, and for those students who would like to be in school. So if we can manage that and manage the logistics associated with it, we'll try to make that happen within the guidelines that are provided by the VDOE and VDH. So hopefully we'll be providing the board with some more updated information once we hear from our Virginia Department of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And we'll move on to 5.02, which is our special education annual update.
And that would be Dr. Mitchell, who is joining us virtually. Dr. Mitchell, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good evening, Chairman Brown, Vice Chair Searles Law, school board members, and Dr. Parker. I am pleased to be here this evening to provide information pertaining to the Division Special Education flow-through application. Oftentimes, that application is referred to as the annual plan. Tonight's presentation is an annual requirement to inform the board of the proposed spending plan for funds allocated by the federal government based on the requirements outlined in the application. Local education agencies are required to submit this application each year pursuant to the federal provisions of the Individuals with Disabilities Act of 2003, as well as state regulations governing special education and related services to students with disabilities. Prior to the submission of the plan, the Virginia Department of Education requires that local divisions review the plan with their local special education advisory committee, as well as our local school board. An important part of the application always includes verification of adherence to a list of assurances that have been delineated by the Virginia Department of Education. These assurances assist us in maintaining state and federal compliance, and they include providing a free public and appropriate education, providing an individualized education plan for each student, which we typically call an IEP, ensuring that students with disabilities are educated with non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate, and implementing policies and practices to prevent misidentification of students with disabilities by gender, race, or ethnicity. We currently provide services to students in 13 distinct categories, totaling 3,685 students, based on the most recent December 1 count. We are only down by 34 students compared to last year. In addition to the assurances, the annual plan requires the division submit information on selected programs and expenditures. One such program is the local jail program, where services are provided by certified special education teachers to students with disabilities who are incarcerated. Additionally, we are required to maintain the same level of state and local funding for students with disabilities as in the previous year, otherwise known as maintenance of effort. In collaboration with local private school representatives, a determination is made to identify the most appropriate use of proportionate set-aside funds for students with disabilities who are parentally placed in private schools. Those private schools are private schools such as Denby Baptist or Hampton Roads Academy, not to be confused with private day special education schools like Rivermont and East End. In most recent years, including this year, the private schools have requested that the funds be allocated for speech-language services. The grant is broken down into two parts, Part B and Part C. Part B funds are designated for preschool through 12th grade special education programs, where Part C is specifically for pre-K special education programs only. We receive approximately $6 million from this grant and are recommending that we continue to utilize the funds for personnel costs, to include salaries and benefits for a variety of instructional personnel. Again, the Part C grant is designated for preschool special education programs only, and we are also recommending the funds be allocated for personnel. Our next steps include seeking approval of the spending plan at the April 20th board meeting, with submission to the Virginia Department of Education no later than May 14th. This concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
I have a question.
Yes, Dr. Best.
Can you go back and just reiterate that private school funding, just to make sure I'm clear on my understanding?
Absolutely. So with the private school funding, the state requires that we set aside a proportionate amount of the funding for students whose parents have decided that they want to place them in a private school. And because most private schools do not provide special education services, there's a pot of money designated for those students. So the heads of each private school meet with a representative from Newport News, look at the amount of money the state has indicated we need to set aside, and then together they determine what will those funds be used for. And so in this year, as well as recent years, the heads of the private schools have decided they'd like it to be spent for speech language services. So if they have a student who attends Denby Baptist but needs speech language services, the parent will bring the student to the closest school or to their own school if they like at the designated time that they have agreed upon with the speech language pathologist and actually receive the speech services right there, and then they go back to their school.
Okay, and can you tell me the difference again between the two schools you talked about, Hampton Roads Academy and like East End Academy? Tell me the difference again.
Yes, the other schools, East End Academy or Rivermont, that are private special education schools only,
okay,
they receive their funding from a different source. So they already have speech language therapists there. They already have special education teachers there. So those students are able to receive those services right there at their school, whereas the other private schools, they don't typically have special education teachers. So if their child needs a service, then the heads of the schools will help determine what service that will be. Now, let's say that a parent enrolls their child in Denby Baptist and they have a learning disability. Then that parent will have to make the decision whether they're going to keep them at Denby Baptist or if they're going to enroll them in public school if the head of their school has not determined that they will use their funds for learning disability.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions?
Yeah, I got one more, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I got
Mr.
a
Harris.
question. And that also includes schools that may be in Hampton, correct? Or if there are schools in Hampton. So in theory, we could, a mother or a parent from Newport News can have their kid sent to Hampton for specific education, and we still have to cover that charge.
That's a great question. So if they have their student enrolled in a school in Hampton, but they live in Newport News, then they would need to come to Newport News to receive the speech language services.
Okay. All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Additional questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell.
Thank you very much.
All right, then we'll now move on to item 5.03, which is our assessment update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we have Dr. Shamika Gerald here and Mr. Joe Ellis, our competent and capable and trusty accountability team, to provide an assessment update this evening. And they have some new information to share in this update on some processes their department has developed to identify students. And we call it shining a flashlight sometimes on specific students based on need to make sure that we are responding accordingly to the needs of our kids. So Mr. Ellis will kick it off, and Dr. Gerald, thank you for joining us this evening as well.
Good evening, Chairman Brown, Vice Chairman Searles Law, members of the board, and Dr. Parker. As Dr. Parker just alluded to, my name is Joe Ellis. I'm the Supervisor of Instructional Data for Newport News Public Schools. And tonight, I'm pleased to present our plan to utilize multiple pieces of data to provide a broader picture of our students and how that broader picture will better provide our students with needed supports and interventions. The purpose of our work is to develop a data-informed process for identifying students in need of additional support. The need for such a process did not arise because of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, its importance was brought to the forefront as a result of the steps taken to protect the health and safety of our teachers and students. We have all experienced struggles over the course of the last year, but our students not only experienced similar personal struggles, they learned to learn all over again. Here's a picture that I feel sums up the situation. This is my son, Logan. He's 7 years old and he's in first grade. While he loves learning, his body language in the picture tells a different story, one that I think we can all sympathize with. That being said, we are all adults and we have a greater capacity to adapt. We've asked students, especially our youngest learners, to be mature beyond their years and take greater ownership of their education. Now that we are back to providing in-person instruction, it is incumbent upon us to support them and ensure they are on track for success. With that in mind, we have 2 points of focus. We must consider the whole child and not simply focus on academics, including their social and emotional well-being and its effect on their success. And in the spirit of equity, we must prioritize students based on their individual needs, not the perceived needs of certain demographic subgroups. This process squarely aligns with our strategic plan, Journey 2025. It supports student success in using data to inform instructional decisions and implements a tiered system of supports for our students. It promotes student wellness by focusing on growth and providing the supports necessary for students to flourish. Finally, it ensures the equitable distribution of resources throughout Newport News Public Schools, addressing the needs of our students individually. Rather than reinventing the wheel, our process relies on guidance provided by the Virginia Department of Education's Recover, Redesign, Restart plan. While the document was designed to help in planning for students to return to in-person instruction, it contains sage advice for developing strategies to identify and support students under any circumstance. A notable feature of the Recover, Redesign, Restart plan is its clear focus on educational equity. As a call to action in support of that focus, the VDOE's Return to School Equity Planning Subcommittee made 2 key recommendations. Rather than rush to collect new information, we were challenged to evaluate existing data to identify students most vulnerable to learning loss. And, as we move forward, focusing on student growth and designing diagnostic systems to measure progress and establish accountability. These 2 recommendations form the basis for a need to adjust our focus. We must meet the needs of our vulnerable learners by stressing quality over quantity with regard to our instruction and assessment, championing equity through a focus on student growth. With an eye on adjusting our focus, we look to address the first of the Return to School Equity Planning Subcommittee's recommendations. To do so, we developed the Vulnerability Index, using our existing data to capture characteristics that point to potential learning vulnerabilities. I will now turn the presentation over to Dr. Gerald to provide you with some additional details. Do you want this? I am, yeah.
Good evening. This summer, the Virginia Department of Education posed the question, what are the various populations of students who will need targeted attention throughout all phases, as they may be most impacted by the extended school closures? In addition, they provided 6 factors to consider in the identification of vulnerable learners. The Return to Learn Assessment Committee reviewed the information and quickly realized that NMPS would develop a more focused metric to prioritize vulnerable learners and a phased return to in-person instruction. The Newport News Public Schools Vulnerability Index takes into consideration the general guidance from the Virginia Department of Education and incorporates unique factors that impact elementary, middle, and high schools in our division. Once the factors were identified, members of the school leadership team, student advancement, curriculum and development, and technology teams were asked to rank the factors from the greatest impact to the least. Now, we recognize that each factor plays a role in student learning outcomes, and each factor earned a weight in our final index. An important part of this work is identifying which indicators could impact any learner and which indicators only impact certain learners. As an example, the team felt that families experiencing homelessness during school closures are in immediate need of critical support and weighted homelessness as the highest indicator of vulnerability for all learners. Michelle and I talked about this. We knew this would happen tonight. At the elementary level, PALS identification applies to our earliest learners' literacy levels. As you can see, this indicator is not included in the calculation for middle and high school learners. At the secondary level, research indicates that the transition from elementary to middle school and middle to high school can have a significant impact on learners and should be considered as a priority in decisions regarding returning to in-person instruction. Now, this is not an exhaustive list of our indicators, but a sample to give you a better idea of the work completed to prioritize our learners for a phased return to in-person instruction in alignment with the Virginia Department of Education's recommendations. Please understand the tool was developed based on early guidance provided in prioritizing learners returning to in-person instruction. We are now using this tool to prioritize remediation and intervention resources for our summer programs and beyond. I would like to point out that the Vulnerability Index is not meant to replace the professional judgment of our educators, but serves as one of many data points used to inform decisions related to supports needed leading to more equitable outcomes. Newport News Public Schools technology team took the weighted factors and created a weighted vulnerability index. Let's look at fifth grade students in Newport News for a brief demonstration of how the index works. Jason does not have any of the vulnerability indicators identified in our previous slide and is a student who would be considered in Tier 1 of our phased return plan. Tier 1 includes students with a vulnerability index of less than 10. Nicholas is considered a twice exceptional student as a student with a disability and identified as gifted. Nicholas was also identified as chronically absent during the 18-19 school year. Nicholas would be indicated as a Tier 2 student. Tier 2 students are with a have a vulnerability index greater than or equal to 10, but less than 20. Now, Sophia is a multilingual learner or English language learner and is identified as economically disadvantaged. Sophia would be considered in Tier 3. Tier 3 includes students with a vulnerability index of 20 or greater. You will see Sophia and Jason in a few minutes as we demonstrate how the vulnerability index can be triangulated with academic factors and is being used to inform the work of the Remediation and Intervention Committee led by Dr. Stanette Bird. Overall, at the division level, 30% of NMPS students are identified as being in Tier 1. This is the lowest level of the vulnerability index. Close to half of our students are in Tier 2, and 25% of students are in Tier 3, the highest risk for vulnerability. As you can see, our elementary schools have the highest percentage of students in Tier 3. Elementary students in grade 3 and below receive additional weighting in the vulnerability index as early learners, as indicated by the Virginia Department of Education. Additionally, being below grade level benchmark on PALS assessments also adds additional weight. As you can see, as we move up through the levels of schooling, the percentage of students in Tier 3 decreases, while the percentage of students in Tier 1 increases. Currently, our technology and student advancement teams use the vulnerability index in conjunction with other data points to prioritize the allocation of resources for our families. In a moment, Mr. Ellis will share an example of how the vulnerability index is being used with current diagnostic data to inform our work. Before I turn the presentation over back to Mr. Ellis, we would like to take the opportunity to thank the members of the Student Advancement, Curriculum and Development, school leadership team. We could not have done this work without their input. A special thank you goes out to our technology team, especially Tracy Leonard, who weighted and coded the indexes so we would have access to this critical information at a click of a button. Mr. Ellis will now take you through the diagnostic assessment data and how the vulnerability index can be used to support the identification of students in need of resources.
Thank you, Dr. Gerald. Again, keeping an eye on adjusting our focus, we addressed the second of the Return to School Equity Planning Subcommittee's recommendations by forming collaborative groups to represent elementary and secondary academic concerns, gathering input from school leadership, curriculum and development, student advancement, and technology. Our initial brainstorming sessions yielded a list of many different demographic, attendance, literacy, math, and social emotional indicators, differentiating the academic focus for the individual school levels. We will use diagnostic assessment data for the literacy and math components where available. These assessments provide us with information relative to each student's present level of performance, as well as allow us to track student growth both over the course of the school year and over the course of a student's journey with Newport News Public Schools. We will use course performance at the secondary level to capture how students are performing in the core subjects. This will allow us to keep a pulse on students at risk for becoming credit deficient and off track for graduating on time. Concerns over the academic effects of school closures in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic are palpable, not just within the Newport News community, but at the state and national levels as well. In fact, there is no shortage of research examining these effects. A quick search on Google Scholar for COVID-19 impact on K-12 education returns over 15,000 results, with major publications from NWEA, Education Week, and the Center for Research on Education Outcomes at Stanford University. The majority of this research is focused on decreased reading and math proficiency levels and considerations for instructional planning when students return to in-person learning. One such study is closer to home, analyzing early literacy in Virginia. So the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screening, better known as PALS, is an early literacy diagnostic assessment given to students in Virginia. It's administered by the University of Virginia in partnership with the VDOE. The PALS office at UVA recently published a research brief entitled Examining Early Reading Skills in the Wake of the COVID-19 Pandemic. Based on data gathered across the state during the assessment administration in the fall, they found an increase in the percentage of kindergarten and first grade students at risk for reading failure when compared to the previous fall. In kindergarten, the increase was just over 9% statewide, while in first grade, the increase was just over 10%. This led the research team to note that it was the largest single-year increase in students below the PALS benchmark in the history of PALS. Examining our data along those same lines, we see a similar increase in our kindergarten risk for reading failure, while at the first grade level, we see a greater increased risk than mentioned in the research brief. While this is almost certainly attributable to the effects of COVID-19 school closures, we must be prepared to address the increase and get our students back on track for success. With that in mind, let's take a look at the elementary level academic factors. First, we use attendance data, categorizing students based on their number of absences. As the number of absences increases, students tend to be less successful, so students in the upper categories receive a greater weight. Our students in grades 3 through 5 take the reading inventory assessment 3 times each year. With the reading inventory, we have aligned students' Lexile scores to SOL performance to develop our own performance bands. Students currently in the beginner performance band receive the highest weight, with the weight decreasing as they move up the levels. Students in grades 2 through 5 take the math inventory assessment 3 times each year. Students are categorized based on their quantile score, again with the greater weight placed on lower levels of performance. Now that you've heard about what we will use to measure elementary students' academic performance, let's take a look at some of the data. So first, you see the elementary attendance percentages, showing that the majority of NNPS elementary students had between 0 and 4 absences. This is a similar percentage when comparing to last school year. There is an increase in the percentage of elementary students in the 15 or more absence category. So on the one hand, we have kept more than half of our youngest students in the lowest absence category through the period of full virtual instruction. But we also have elementary students that struggle to stay engaged with virtual learning. Next, you see our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students' current performance on the reading inventory assessment. The chart is showing how students are categorized into the NNPS performance bands based on their most recent Lexile score, like Friday. It is important to note that students are categorized according to the spring benchmark score. So in essence, what we're doing here is when they take the test, we're measuring whether they are already reading on grade level. Each student is assigned a growth goal after the fall administration, and their progress towards that goal is monitored throughout the school year. We round out our elementary data with our 2nd through 5th grade students' current performance on the math inventory assessment. Similar to the reading inventory chart above, students are categorized into performance groups based on their most recent quantile score. Again, it's important to note that students are being evaluated against the end-of-year benchmark score. Just like with the reading inventory, students are assigned a growth goal, and their progress is measured throughout the school year. Now let's look at the middle school academic factors. Again, we use the same attendance data, categorizing students based on their number of absences and giving students in the upper categories a greater weight. Middle school students, like their elementary peers, take the reading inventory assessment 3 times each year. In middle school, students are categorized based directly on their Lexile scores, with students at the lower levels of performance receiving the highest weight. And at the middle school level, we start to include course grades in the 4 core subjects, as each grade is on the same grading scale, and we begin to introduce credit-bearing courses. Students will have their previous year's grades count for 1/3 of the weight, while the current year's grades will count for the remaining 2/3. As we examine our middle school data, let's first look again at attendance. Close to 70% of NNPS middle school students have between 0 and 4 absences. Comparing these percentages to last year shows a large movement of students from the 5 to 9 absence category into the 0 to 4 absence category. This points to increased levels of participation and engagement in the middle grades during virtual learning. Next, you see our middle school students' current performance on the reading inventory assessment. Just like with elementary students, middle school students are categorized into performance groups based on their most recent Lexile score. Their reading levels are being assessed against the spring benchmark score, and each student is assigned a growth goal and their progress is monitored throughout the school year. For the course grades, we categorize based on the number of Fs students have received, with a greater weight placed on students with a greater number of Fs. The distribution of students based on the number of Fs they've received is shifted towards the higher categories when compared to last school year. This mirrors a national trend in education during the first half of the 2020-21 school year. Finally, let's look at the high school academic factors. We use the same attendance data, categorizing students based on the number of absences. And at the high school level, we rely on course grades in the 4 core subjects. Just as in middle school, high school students will have their previous year's grades count for 1/3 of the weight, while the current year's grades count for the remaining 2/3 of the weight. So examining our high school data, let's look at attendance one last time. Close to 3/4 of NNPS high school students have between 0 and 4 absences. Comparing these percentages to last year shows a large movement of students from the 5 to 9 and 10 to 14 absence categories into the 0 to 4 absence category. This points again to increased levels of participation and engagement, this time in the high school grades. For the course grades, we keep with categorizing students based on the number of Fs they've received, again with a greater weight placed on students with a greater number of Fs. When compared to last school year, the distribution of students based on the number of Fs they've received is shifted towards both ends of the spectrum. So for our 9th through 11th grade students, there are both more students who did not receive an F and more students who received 5 or more Fs. However, the increase in the percentage of students without an F is greater than the increase in students with 5 or more Fs. For our seniors, the percentage of students who did not receive an F increased by about 9 percentage points. So if we remember that the purpose of this work is to provide students with support based on their individual needs, doing so requires that we utilize both the vulnerability index and those academic factors we just reviewed, allowing them to work together to provide us with a means to make purposeful, data-informed decisions. So Dr. Gerald explained how the vulnerability index was originally developed to guide our decisions on which students to prioritize when phasing in in-person instruction. And now that we are back to in-person instruction, we can continue to use the vulnerability index to provide students with remediation and intervention supports. Additionally, our academic factors shine the data flashlight on student struggles so we know how to support their growth. Rather than combining the two measures into a single all-encompassing score, we are keeping the two parts separate, but allowing them to intersect, focusing on the intersection of a student's potential vulnerabilities and their current academic performance gives us an opportunity to provide purposeful, targeted supports. To give you an idea of why it is so important to consider both factors, I'll take you through 2 quick examples. So one of the most important reasons for keeping the vulnerability index and the academic factors as distinct pieces is to guard against implicit bias. Bias is inherent to the human condition, but by remaining objective, we can eliminate misconceptions about our students. Remember Sophia, one of Dr. Gerald's example 5th grade students? She's a Tier 3 on the Vulnerability Index at the highest level of risk for potential learning vulnerability. We could simply assume that she is struggling because she's a multilingual learner and economically disadvantaged, and put her on a watch list or in a course of remediation, but examining the academic factors tells her complete story. She doesn't have perfect attendance, but she's on the lower end of the scale. She is an excellent reader, scoring in the advanced category on the reading inventory assessment, and she has been an excellent reader, showing consistent Lexile growth over time. She is doing well in math, scoring in the high category on the math inventory assessment. And while she didn't show growth last year, she did show growth based on her fall assessment. Sophia's data speaks to an important truth, that having some characteristics of a vulnerable learner does not condemn a student to academic struggle. Conversely, our biases can also run in the opposite direction. Remember Jason, another one of Dr. Gerald's examples? He's a Tier 1 on the Vulnerability Index, at the lowest level of potential learning vulnerability, and in fact, Jason has none of the vulnerability indicators. However, Jason does have a troubling number of absences and is in danger of being classified as chronically absent. He's a struggling reader, scoring in the beginner category on the reading inventory assessment. His test history speaks to his struggles as a virtual learner, as he showed growth last year and his performance has since declined. Jason is showing a similar pattern with the math inventory assessment, currently scoring in the low category. He showed growth last year, and his performance has since declined with the math inventory as well. Jason's situation cements the truth we saw with Sophia, that knowing a student's potential learning vulnerability is not sufficient to predict their academic performance. These two examples speak directly to the importance of considering the individual circumstances of each child as we make decisions regarding their course of study. For Sophia, we could monitor her attendance to reduce any additional missed days. We could monitor her English language progress to ensure she successfully exits the program. And we could determine whether she is currently receiving talented and gifted services as a means to enrich her academic progress. For Jason, we could schedule time with a student involvement specialist to encourage consistent attendance and participation, and with a professional school counselor to support his social and emotional needs. We could also initiate the student support team process to begin a closer and more intentional monitoring of his progress. So I've talked throughout this presentation about making data-informed decisions and shown you two examples of how we can do just that. I want to stress that we do not choose the phrase data-informed lightly. While we want to ensure a level of objectivity to minimize bias in our decision-making, we also want to acknowledge the relationships that our staff members work so hard to build with our students. Making data-informed decisions means using the data as one piece of information in the puzzle, but also honoring the professional judgment of our teachers and administrators. Their daily work with students provides them with a deeper understanding of the individual circumstances that play an important role in supporting that supports they need. So at this time, I'll turn the presentation back over to Dr. Gerald to preview what's on the horizon.
Joe gets to talk about all the cool stuff. Now that we've discussed our tools to inform our work, we'll close out with a review of what data will be gathered during marking period 4 and the testing that will provide this information. Wait, did I click it? I'm going to just let you click it, Ms. Price. During our last quarter of the 2020-2021 school year, we will continue to gather data to inform our work as we move into summer and into the 21-22 school year. Students will participate in division diagnostic assessments identified in blue and state-required assessments identified in black. The board and our community can expect an update on these results later this school year. In addition, the NNPS assessment calendar is available on the Newport News Public Schools website and can be easily accessed by scanning the QR code on your screen. You may be wondering about our third marking period benchmark assessments. The primary function of our benchmarks is to inform instructional decisions and identify supports for each learner. As we transition to in-person instruction, it is critical that our phenomenal instructional staff has the opportunity to develop relationships, create routines, and provide high-quality instruction. Newport News Public Schools has aligned its work with 3 recommendations from the U.S. Department of Education and the Virginia Department of Education. In partnership with curriculum development and student advancement, guidance has been provided to use shorter assessments that are available online and are offered over an extended period of time. Our curriculum leaders have developed a list of formative assessments that has been shared with our teachers and our building leaders. On March 2nd, the Virginia Department of Education announced the release of the Virginia Remote Student Progress Test, VRSPT. One more acronym for you to learn. As a tool for schools and families to remain informed on our progress. The VRSTP is a traditional online assessment that assesses grades reading and math for grades 3 through 5 and science in grades 5 and 8. In previous presentations, I shared that reading and mathematics achievement and science participation are accountability measures under the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. The VRSTP will not replace SOL test performance under federal or state accountability measures. The VRSTP is required to be offered to students in grades 3 through 8 who are receiving all of their instruction remotely and whose families refuse to have them come to school to take SOL assessments. A plan for Newport News Public Schools is currently in development, and as updates are available, we will be sure to communicate that to you and our school community. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the board, our school leadership, our students, and our whole community for your flexibility and your partnership as we take on assessments in a whole new environment. We're also ready to take any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Gerald. So questions from the board?
I have.
Yes, Ms. Amon, let's see your hand first.
Oh, no, go ahead, Dr. West. I think you had yours.
Okay. Can you tell me how these virtual...
The virtual remote student progress test?
Not the test yet. How we talk about looking at the whole student.
Yes, ma'am.
So how this, for your student support team, how is that different? Because didn't the student support team look at the whole student as well? Like how is this, and then as well as testing data, didn't it look at everything as well? How is this?
This is just a new measure that they're able to use that combines, instead of pulling several reports together, like pulling the attendance report, pulling the grade report, pulling all of these reports, whether a student is economically disadvantaged or homeless, or pulling all, this is one metric now. So we have combined those things into one metric. So it supports the SST process for our schools by providing a more concise picture of students.
Okay. And then who, how, where, how, and who. Can you tell me how this will work if I'm a teacher? Let's say if I'm a teacher.
Okay.
Or an administrator. Can you tell me how it works?
Yes, ma'am. The administrators, we want to make sure we have gone through a validation process with the vulnerability index to ensure that it properly functions and identifies students in partnership with our technology team. So we have finished that validation process, and we will then roll it out to the principals through training. Because what we want schools to understand is that the vulnerability index and the academic tiers are not the only tool that they must use. Their professional judgment still. I take, for example, I'll use Jordan, for example, since he's here. Jordan can come to me as a building principal today and say, Dr. Gerald, I have this, and this going on. Before I can enter it into the computer so the vulnerability index gets updated, as a professional, I can call Dr. Mitchell and say, Dr. Mitchell, I need crisis support at my school. I need these supports wrapped around my family. So this is just another piece of information. And as the building principal, it'll be available in Synergy Analytics, so it'll be available online to the building principals.
And teachers as well?
At this point, we have not made that determination about rolling out to teachers. We're really using it to make division level and building based decisions, and we'll discuss that moving forward. But that is a great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, I was just trying to process in my head like how it would work. Okay, that's it for now.
Well, just keep in mind and think about it this way: as a teacher, you would have access to your students' records,
Mm-hmm.
but we also protect a lot of information on students for people who do not necessarily need that information.
Mm-hmm.
So, but who would not normally through other means have access to that student's academic or record. So we want to make sure that we're using the vulnerability index in a way that benefits, that identifies how we can better serve the student. But we also don't want to make sure that it's just something that's going out to individuals who don't necessarily need information on that student's personal circumstances. So the building level administrator, the teacher of record, the school counselor who works with that student, or anyone who has that student on their caseload, will work out the processes on how that data point will be available to them, and how they may make better decisions to provide service to that student that may be needed. But it definitely is something we wouldn't want to put in everyone's hands or make accessible to staff who are not in direct supervision of that student. And we wouldn't do that with their academic record either, but same concept.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Amon.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. I guess first, because we were talking about sort of how it works, the hypothetical of Jason, it almost seems like in the two cases that you gave us, the vulnerability index informs academically struggling students. Because if you see it and it's high, but they're doing fine, you might have some parameters, but the real key is if they're struggling, that may give us an indication of why they're struggling and what we can do. Mm-hmm. And are there, the suggestions had to do with monitoring, I am assuming, but I just wanted to ask, are there also parameters where it may or may not be attendance so much as he may just need help. He may not be able to learn in a virtual fashion versus a face-to-face.
Yes, that is also included. And what I would like to share is, one, that the vulnerability index is a live indicator, so it changes as our students change. So as factors in our students' lives change, we update that information, but we are also working on a tool that will create an intersection. So you would be able to see how many students that are in Tier 1 are high academic needs students, and vice versa, how many students in Tier 3 really require us to do some really deep diving into that record to make sure that we're really getting, like Sophia, for example, how many students are there that we would just assume are Tier 3 and need extensive remediation based on some generalization, but really looking at her academic factors. And Mr. Ellis found that Sophia has already been identified for gifted and talented services. So we're really using it on both ends. How do we identify support for students, but also how do we elevate and lift students up who are already advanced, and how do we keep them moving forward in our school division enrichment? I heard you, Dr. Parker.
And then I guess my second question had to do with jumping back to the elementary factors and just looking at the ranges for I think it's the math testing. How does some of this compare to last year? I heard you on like the middle and high, sort of some of the comparisons, but in elementary and on the math, is some of that attributable to our curriculum shift in this year?
Mr. Ellis has that information in his.
Okay.
Let me just flip back here to that page. The reading inventory and the math inventory are fairly similar performance when compared to last year, which, as the guy that does the data all the time, I'm, pretty surprised to see that throughout all of the struggles that have been in the media and, nationwide about student performance, that through all of that, our students are performing similarly to how they were last year. So when I look through, like an NWEA report that details, potential learning loss and what we should expect when students come back, and then we look at from last year to this year, we're actually comparing student to student, not just third graders last year to third graders this year. It's literally looking at that student's trajectory over the course of being out, and now that they're back, we don't see that like slump. It's really interesting in Newport News that our students have actually improved while being out on the pandemic with respect to their Lexile level in reading. So speaking specifically to the reading inventory, third grade is pretty much right in line, similar performance to last year. Fourth grade is better performance. We have more students in the upper advanced level, but fifth grade is the opposite. We have slightly more students in the beginner than in the upper levels. With the math inventory, it is fairly similar. Just let me flip back to make sure here.
And while he's looking for that, the math inventory is a fairly new assessment. So we, the same company provides the reading inventory, now has a diagnostic tool that measures growth in math over the course of the year. And this is, I think we piloted last year, correct me if I'm wrong, and we're administering it this year, correct?
Last year was our first full year of implementation, but we didn't get that full year because we got shut down in March of last year. But it is similar performance, yes.
And is the math inventory, does that work with Eureka like it expects, or is it from them?
Well, so the math inventory gives you, when the student takes the assessment, they get their quantile score, which is a measure of what they're ready to attempt next in their progression of mastering math concepts. So it does inform teachers as to what each individual student is ready to take on. And I certainly don't want to speak for our curriculum department, but I know the Eureka curriculum is very structured in the way that it's presented. So in certain instances, those are going to align, and in certain instances, they're not. And that's where we provide the students with the additional supports that they need to make sure we're getting them that growth to be on grade level and mastering that content.
Because in essence, it's supposed to be a math literacy score. So it's showing growth in math literacy over the course of the year based on where that student should be in the third grade or the fourth grade. It doesn't align necessarily with a specific curriculum, but what the kid age appropriately should know in math over the and how they've grown from concepts at the beginning of the year to over time, similar to the reading.
Okay, and I think we have our eyes open to if what we're using is tracking with what they should and if we need to tweak.
Well, since we obviously missed the opportunity for that final baseline data on both the inventories last year because we ended in March. But now that we're back and we have a full year of data, we'll be able to track over time the percentage of students who are showing a year's worth of growth, half a year's worth of growth, more than a year's worth of growth, as we bring that Eureka Math and our other tools online. So that should correlate, and we should start seeing improvement in those percentages.
Right. So as Dr. Parker was alluding to, it's akin to measuring math literacy, and it's a universal screener, just like the reading inventory or the PALS assessment. So it's not pegged to any specific curriculum. Right. It's curriculum agnostic.
How well does the kid read? How well do they calculate? So it's competence and ability. So before you get into questions, the point I think we'll go back to Dr. Best's question. How can we use this information that's provided tonight? We obviously have to, we'll provide a robust summer experience for our students, and we will be addressing not only learning loss over the pandemic, but also summer learning loss as well. How do we identify the students and what do they need? We're really focused in equipping ourselves to really focus and hone in on students who we need to identify for specific programs and opportunities. Some it may just be enrichment, some it may be transitional programs, some it may be special programs for our English language learners, but knowing which students necessarily who need that enrichment or remediation is very important, because you want to get the right kids into the programs to get your biggest impact. So we've increased our ability to identify students specifically for what they need, and not just using SOL material to identify as one. That's just one other data point in addition to these multiple points that we're talking about this evening.
Thank you. And I believe, Madam Vice Chair, you have a question as well.
Yes, comment and question. I'm very thankful of the work that you and your team did last year and the year before, where we could look at student to student. so that we're ready to hit the ground running, for coming back and for now. I mean, because we're not just waiting to make those changes later. We're making those now. For those of us on the board who love, we really do. He's not the only one who loves data. There are several of us else who do. Will it be possible to get some of that, some of your data on what, you were looking at in terms of what students are doing now and where they were, and because that's very helpful to us as we're trying to communicate the direction that the board and the team needs to go.
So.
And that is part of the work that we're doing. Mr. Ellis and I have been working on developing a hard copy report that has some of that information in it for you as well. Just because the PALS information was so fresh and RI and MI came out Friday, we wanted to make sure the presentation had the most up-to-date information, but you can expect a more formalized hand-submitted report that you can review the information that I know that you're used to receiving, but we want to make sure tonight we got you the most up-to-date information. And to speak to the point that Dr. Parker was making, and Dr. Meglemont brought up earlier, that this information would be used to inform our programs as we move forward. And this is an example of how we're developing new tools and resources in combination and working cross-functionally, which is what the strategic plan is all about. How do we incorporate our work across departments to support all of our learners in Newport News Public Schools and make the best decisions we can for all of our students. Okay. But you will get a report. Mr. Ellison, I will work on that and make sure it gets to you. We want to make sure you have accurate information in front of you tonight, though.
Thank you so much. We look forward to that update.
You'll be testing the final, the spring RI-MI will take place when?
It is on the assessment website. I can pull it up for you.
I want to say May, but I may be wrong.
Yes.
It's end of April.
End of April.
End of April.
So SOLs will take place in May. So we're talking, if not the May board meeting,
the June board meeting.
About the June board meeting.
Yes, sir. The June board meeting. And if all the dates have been updated on our website as well, so parents have access to all of the testing dates. It was on the QR code. It's on the testing website as well. So if there are any questions, we really have that information, try to be as transparent as possible because we know parents have to plan around that stuff.
All right. Any additional questions? All right. Well, I am gonna slow you down. Can you go back to slide 2?
All the way to
go back to slide 2.
Is this going to be a comment about my son?
Yes. Because I just want to point out that when I see slide 2, it really looks indicative of our entire year. I think that this picture is really captures the essence of the entire year. Yes. And you're going to want to, as a dad, I think you want to frame that and hold on to that. I think that really captures the year. Yeah, right there.
There we go.
And so then the question, and I'm just going to try to paraphrase some of our board priorities in this area. And I believe the 4 areas that were identified were reading, math, and science. And it looks that with this vulnerability index, we'll have a great way of making sure we're comparing essentially apples to apples from year to year. And I believe that the overall question is comparing from last year to this year. The question is what is the progress level? So if we go through the tiers and we go tiers, math, science, and reading across those various tiers, and just look at last year to this year and what growth has taken place or has not taken place, I think that is. I think that's the overall question that a lot of board members are articulating. And then the other question around that would just be how soon, and is it possible, and then 2, how soon would we be able to get a table or a chart like that?
Well, I'm sure we can put together a table and chart fairly quickly, but I would caution us against the apples to apples comparison from last year to this year, only because the Virginia Department of Education is setting this year as our baseline. When accreditation restarts in the 22-23 school year, this will be our baseline first year of accreditation in our 3-year average. Now, we can provide that information, but just understand that as we move forward, we will use this in Newport News, as with the state, as where we start for our accreditation as we continue beyond this point. So because accreditation was waived at the federal level last year, and no assessments were taken, we just kind of have to hit reset on that process. But we can provide that information to you, just understanding that as we move forward, we won't kind of look back at that.
Perfect. All right, wonderful. All right, and I believe that was the last question, and so we'll thank you for that great report and for that picture. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we'll go on to the next item on our agenda, which is 5.04, the attendance report, 5.05, the membership report, and 5.06, the construction report. Board members, you have received copies of the reports in your packets. Do you have any questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to 5.07, which are comments by the superintendent. Dr. Parker, the floor is yours.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could take a moment of privilege here, I'd like to ask for a quick moment of silence for a student at Denby High School. We were informed today that we lost a student, 18-year-old who attended senior at Denby High School. Our teams were at the school today supporting staff and students due to unfortunate circumstances, and for the privacy of the family, I will not mention the student's name, but I just want to share that we are in support of the Denby community and the loss of this young man, and we support you, we love you, and we want to make sure that the family gets that message. So just for a short moment of silence, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. So my general remarks, Mr. Chairman, I will get started here and say that we have a lot of good things going on in Newport News recently, and we're very proud of a lot of the work that our staff are doing, and including our staff who were acknowledged this evening during the board meeting. I'd like to congratulate the young men of distinction at an Achievable Dream Middle and High School who earned first place in the 2021 Black History Virtual Trivia Bowl. The competition was presented by the Alpha Iota chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and a trophy and individual medals were presented to the young men of distinction, and they were pictured here. Congratulations to the team, their trivia coaches, and their sponsor, Lloyd McKeithen. Another congratulations to Mrs. Kathy Alexander. You may know Mrs. Alexander. She is our Executive Director of Nutrition and Wellness, who has been named the 2021 School Meals Hero by No Kids Hungry Virginia. Mrs. Alexander and the Child Nutrition Services team have worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic to ensure that students receive healthy meals at schools and mobile sites throughout the city. The team who maintained meals service during Thanksgiving and winter break, they have served over 500,000 meals since last spring. Congratulations to Mrs. Alexander, and I know she would, if she were standing here, she would say it takes a team to make that happen, and we also congratulations to our well done. The Diversity and Inclusion Task Force is accepting nominations for the renaming of Epps Elementary, Lee Hall Elementary, Nelson Elementary, and Dozier Middle School. As you may recall, the school board voted to rename these schools in September because their namesakes do not reflect the school board's current values of diversity and inclusion. Students and families and community members are invited to participate in the nomination process by submitting a suggested name before Wednesday, March 24th, which is, we're one day away from that, at 8 p.m. So please visit our website for more information at nnschools.org. And we're looking forward to bringing recommendations to the board at the April meeting. This March is Student Empowerment Month in our school division. Over the past several weeks, we've been encouraging students to use their voices, talents, and experiences to promote positive culture and community. Student and family activities continue this week. Tonight, the youth development team is hosting a tribute to women in STEM, and tomorrow there will be a World Changer Wednesday empowerment session for students in all grade levels. I encourage all students to participate in these activities. They have been well attended, as I've said, and I've seen that firsthand, and visit our website for a complete schedule of events. And lastly, a reminder for students, families, and staff, Friday, April 2nd is a half day for students, and April 5th through the 9th is spring break. All schools and offices will be closed. And we would ask that families and students be mindful of their safety over spring break, come back ready to learn for that final push of the school year, and we are looking forward to a restful spring break. So that concludes my comments for this evening, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Parker. Now we'll move on to item 6, which is another opportunity to hear from the public. Do we have any additional cards at this time, Madam Clerk? No, sir. All right. There being no cards, then that will adjourn our meeting tonight. We thank you all for coming and see you all in April.
All right. Thank you, Douglas.